Yeah, I need to make a confession because I sacrificed my family for ministry. And there's a time I wouldn't have said it that way because I would have called it commitment. I would have called it loyalty. I would have said it was faithfulness. I would have told you that people needed me. That ministry required something from me, that there are seasons when you just have to grind. And the uncomfortable part about all of that is that some of that was true. There are seasons that require more of you. There are moments when the assignment demands unusual sacrifice. There's certainly times when my family looks at me and says, go, we've got you, do what you need to do. So the lessons that I've learned weren't around working hard being wrong. It wasn't that ministry should never inconvenience my family. We're a ministry family. It wasn't even that family should get every minute of my time. But the lesson was much harder than that. I had to learn the difference between my family participating in the sacrifice and my family becoming the sacrifice. And I'm still learning that difference with every opportunity, with every yes, with every no, in every season, with every time somebody needs something from me, with every time the work feels urgent. I'm still learning. But some years ago, I did make one decision that I am proud of. I told myself that I'm never going back to the version of me who automatically assumes that because something is for God, that everybody I love should simply absorb the cost. And maybe that's why I'm thinking about this, because we just had a newborn. Maybe I'm in that space because if I'm being totally transparent, this episode is actually releasing later than I intended. But this time I'm actually proud that it's late because our lives have been interrupted in the best way possible. Our schedules have changed. Our priorities have gotten tested. Our capacity has shifted. And it's moments like this where suddenly you find out whether all the things you've said about what matters actually survives contact with real life. And so this episode isn't about how I figured out some work-life balance, because I haven't. And to be honest, I don't know anybody that has really. Truth be told, I don't even know if balance is a thing. But it is about something deeper. How do we pursue what God has called us to without sacrificing what God has entrusted to us? Because those two things were never meant to be enemies. Let's get into it. Well, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Culture and Covenant podcast. I'm your host, Timothy, and today we're talking about when your calling becomes an excuse. Because there's something uniquely dangerous about neglect when you're doing something good. I mean, if I'm destroying my family for something obviously selfish, it seems like everybody can see that. But ministry, leadership, building a business to provide for your family, serving people, see, those things come with noble explanations. People need me. This is a critical season. We're almost there. You said once we get through this launch, you said once the business reaches this level, you said once the church gets established, once I get this promotion, once this project is over, you said, then I'll slow down. Then I'll be more present. Then we'll take the vacation. Then I'll make it to the game. Then we'll have dinner together. There's always a then. But you know this to be true. Then has a funny way of moving because ambition rarely reaches a point where it says, okay, cool, that's enough. You can go home now. There's always another level to reach, y'all. There's always another person to connect with, another opportunity to pursue, another crisis to solve, another goal to achieve. And ministry can make this especially complicated because we can attach God's name to our inability to stop. And that's something I've had to confront in myself because ambition is incredibly good at learning Christian vocabulary. Ego starts to call itself excellence. People pleasing starts to call itself servanthood. The need to be needed starts to call itself calling. Workaholism starts to call itself faithfulness, and exhaustion can somehow become evidence that we're serious about God. But being exhausted doesn't automatically mean that we're being obedient. Sometimes it just means that we're exhausted. And I know this to be true. Some of us were taught to admire exhaustion. And I really do think we need to talk about this, because some of us didn't invent this mentality in ourselves. We inherited it. Y'all, if I'm being very honest, I followed leaders who celebrated burning the candle at both ends. Keep going. Push harder. Sleep later. Rest when it's done. You ever heard the person that say, I'll rest when I die? Give everything. Empty the tank. And if you were exhausted, that almost became a badge of honor. It meant that you cared. It meant that you were committed. It meant that you wanted it badly enough. And when that mentality comes from someone that you respect spiritually, you don't always question it. You absorb it. You start believing that exhaustion is evidence of devotion, that availability is evidence of anointing, that boundaries mean that you're not hungry enough, that saying no means that you're not committed. Y'all, these are lies that I've had to unlearn, because thankfully I've also had some mentors who have showed me something completely different, something completely opposite. Men and women who made it abundantly clear that destroying yourself does not impress God, that neglecting your marriage does not impress God, that being emotionally unavailable to your children because everybody else needs you does not impress God. God is not standing in heaven applauding because you haven't taken a day off. In fact, when you look at the biblical story, rest is not humanity's idea. It's God's command. Sabbath wasn't invented because people became soft. Limits weren't introduced because humanity lacked ambition. We're limited because that's how God designed us. We need sleep. We need rest. We need a relationship. We need rhythms. We need covenant. And maybe acknowledging those limitations in us isn't weakness. Maybe it's acknowledging our humanity. Because truth be told, refusing to accept your limitations can become a subtle way of pretending that you're God. And you are not omnipresent. You cannot be everywhere. You cannot meet every need. You cannot answer every call. You cannot carry everybody. You cannot say yes to everything. And God never asked you to. Y'all, knowing that has been freeing for me, because some of the healthiest mentors I've had weren't impressed by how much I could carry. They were more interested in whether I knew it or not, what was actually mine to carry. And there is a difference. And let me be abundantly clear. Choosing my family first does not mean that my family never sacrifices. But here's where we have to be careful, because I don't want to swing the pendulum so far that prioritizing family becomes another cliche. There are times when the people we love sacrifice because of what we're called to do. That's real. There are seasons when I do have to grind. There are moments when something genuinely requires more of me. There are times when my family has graciously allowed me to disappear into something for a little while because we all understood that this thing actually matters. But here's what's different now. We talk about it. It's not assumed. It's not, well, this is my calling, so everybody adjust. There are conversations. There are agreements. There's an understanding. And we measure it because the outcome has to be worth what we're spending to get there. And that's important, because I need you to know that every yes costs something. If I say yes to this, then I'm saying no to something else. If I give my hours here, then those hours cannot simultaneously exist somewhere else. So before we enter one of those seasons, the question is not simply, is this a good opportunity? It's, is this opportunity worth what it will require from us? And notice I said us, because if my decision changes everybody's life, then it's not really just my decision. Because there is a difference between shared sacrifice and unilateral neglect. And this might be one of the most important distinctions in this entire conversation. because healthy families do sometimes have to sacrifice together. That's covenant. Maybe mom is finishing a degree. Maybe dad is launching something new. Maybe there's a very busy ministry season. Maybe somebody has to work unusual hours for a period of time. Maybe there's a financial goal everybody believes in. And so the family says, we're in this together. That's very different from one person deciding my ambition matters, so everybody else needs to deal with it. One is shared sacrifice. The other becomes unilateral neglect. And sometimes the difference is simply whether everybody has a voice. Does your spouse know what's happening? Have you asked what this season is costing them? Have your children been feeling your absence in ways that you haven't even noticed? Have you decided the outcome is worth it without asking the people who are actually paying part of the price? And those are different questions. Those are difficult questions because covenant gives people a voice in the decisions that affects them. And I actually think there's another layer to this, because your family should know you well enough to recognize when something really is imperative. Here's what I mean. I want my normal pattern to communicate my priorities so clearly that when I do have to step away for something unusual, I don't have to give a speech convincing my family that they matter to me. They should already know, because my reputation at home should speak for me. If I'm normally present, if I'm normally available, if I normally protect our time, if I normally choose them, then when I say, hey, y'all, I really need to give everything I've got to this for the next few days, then there's already a trust that's established behind that request. Not because I'm entitled to their sacrifice, but because there's history there. The exception makes sense because neglect isn't the norm. And that's what I want, y'all. That's what I'm working on. Because the question that looms for me is, what does your reputation at home say? Y'all, that question has been sitting with me for the last couple of years, because we spend so much energy managing our reputation publicly. We ask ourselves, what do people think about me? Do they respect me? Do they think I'm dependable? Do they think I'm successful? Do they see me as a good leader? You know, you've asked it. But the question is, what is my reputation at home? Because the people at home see the version of me that no one else sees. They know whether the patience is real. They know whether the kindness is real. They know whether you're actually available. They know what happens when the microphone is off. And this is where one question keeps confronting me. What's the point of the world knowing me if my family doesn't? What's the win there? What's the point of strangers feeling like they have access to me while my own family feels like they need an appointment? What's the point of being celebrated for wisdom publicly if I don't have enough margin to listen privately? What's the point of people describing me as generous with my time while the people closest to me are living on my leftovers? And I don't ask those questions because I've mastered this. I told you I haven't. Some days I do get it right. Some days I realize I was physically home, but mentally I was somewhere else. Sometimes I catch myself checking something when I really should be listening. Sometimes an opportunity sounds exciting and I have to remind myself to slow down before saying yes. Sometimes the people closest to us see our priorities slipping before we even do. And that's why covenant matters. We need people close enough to say, hey, you're here, but you're not really here. And we need enough humility to hear that. Because the people closest to us should not have to live on our leftovers. And I think this is where many of us struggle, because, and it's not because we don't love our families. We do. We do. But everybody else often gets the scheduled version of us, the prepared version, the caffeinated version, the version that showed up ready. And then home gets whatever's left, whatever remains, the tired version, the distracted version, the short-tempered version, the version with only 8% of your battery left. And hear me, I know that nobody intentionally decides I'm going to give everybody else my best and give my family my leftovers. I know that no one decides that, but it happens gradually. One important thing at a time, one reasonable excuse at a time, one busy season at a time, until eventually what you said was supposed to be temporary becomes normal. And that's why this requires constant attention. Hear me, not guilt, attention. Because guilt says you're failing, but wisdom says pay attention. Where's your energy going? Who gets most of your patience? Who gets the majority of your curiosity? Who gets your eye contact? Who gets the phone turned face down? Who gets the version of you that isn't trying to hurry to the next thing? Those little things tell us a lot about what we actually value. And this is important because Jesus was remarkably good at handling interruptions. And one of the things I find fascinating about Jesus is how interruptible he was. He's going somewhere and somebody stops him. He's on the way to a house and somebody touches his garment. He's going from this city to that city and someone cries out from the roadside. Children are brought to him. Somebody has a need that wasn't apparently on the schedule. And Jesus was certainly purposeful, but he doesn't ever appear to be enslaved to urgency. And y'all, this challenges me because sometimes we act as though God's will is incredibly fragile. Like if we don't maximize every minute, everything is going to fall apart. But Jesus knew his assignment better than anybody who has ever lived, and he still had time to stop. So I've had to ask myself, why am I sometimes more anxious about accomplishing my calling than Jesus appeared to be about accomplishing his? Maybe urgency and importance aren't the same thing. Maybe the loudest thing in my life isn't automatically the most important thing. And maybe some of the most sacred responsibilities in our lives rarely scream for attention. It's the child wanting to talk. It's the spouse needing connection. It's dinner at the table. It's sitting beside somebody. It's being available. It's holding a newborn. Those things don't come with analytics. Nobody applauds. Nobody posts the numbers. But maybe that's exactly why covenant requires intentionality. Some of the most valuable things God gives us are impossible to measure. And I told you earlier, I really do think balance might be the wrong goal because we talk about work-life balance a lot. But I'm not sure life is ever perfectly balanced. Some seasons require more work, while some seasons require more family. Some seasons require rest, and some require building. Some require grieving, while some require serving. Life is always moving. And so maybe maturity isn't keeping everything perfectly equal. Maybe maturity is knowing what season is requiring of you and having enough humility to make the adjustment. And y'all, that's where this newborn season has challenged me, because I told you capacity has changed, plans change, sleep has definitely changed, okay? And maybe our instinct is, how do I get everything back to normal? But if we haven't learned anything from a few years ago when the world shut down, maybe normal isn't the goal. Maybe God is doing something in the disruption, because some seasons aren't primarily designed to produce something from us. Sometimes they're designed to produce something in us. Patience, tenderness, sacrifice, humility, dependence, presence. And we don't like those things because they don't always look impressive. We've become very good at celebrating fruit, but roots grow underground, and nobody applauds roots. Nobody sees roots. But the truth is, everything visible eventually depends on what happened when no one was watching. Maybe the season that feels less productive publicly is producing more important work privately, because covenant will eventually tell ambition no. And here it is. This is where culture and covenant collide, because everyone loves covenant, when covenant feels inspirational. But covenant eventually costs something. Marriage interrupts preference. Children interrupt independence. Friendship interrupts convenience. Integrity interrupts opportunity. Rest interrupts productivity. Following Jesus interrupts self-rule. Eventually, covenant looks at ambition and says, no, you don't get every opportunity. You don't get unlimited access to my time. Growth isn't worth every price. Success doesn't justify every sacrifice. And that's difficult, especially when the opportunity is good. But maturity is learning that good opportunities can still receive a no. Because every open door isn't necessarily your door. And every need isn't necessarily your assignment. Sometimes faithfulness means going, while also sometimes faithfulness means staying. Sometimes faithfulness means grinding, while sometimes faithfulness means stopping. And the difficult part is having enough relationship with God and enough honesty with the people around us to know which season we're actually in. Because there's always an invoice. So who is paying for the version of success we're pursuing? And maybe that's the question underneath this entire episode. Who is paying for the version of success we're pursuing? Because every ambition sends somebody a bill. Maybe we're paying it ourselves, right? Maybe our health is paying for it. Maybe our marriage is paying for it. Maybe our children are paying for it. Watch this. Maybe our peace is paying for it. Maybe our relationship with God is paying for it. And sacrifice sometimes is absolutely worth it, but we should know the price. And the people paying for it should have a voice. That's the difference I'm trying to live out now. I'm not living it perfectly. I'm not living it flawlessly. This is something I'm pursuing every day because I am living it intentionally. And I'm nowhere close to where I used to be. I promise you that. I am grateful for that. But I also know how easy it would be to drift. Because nobody wakes up one morning and decides, today, I'm going to become emotionally unavailable to everybody that I love. Nobody decides that. But we do drift there. So we keep checking. We keep talking. We keep listening. We keep asking our spouse questions we're not sure we want the answers to. Like, how are we doing for real? Do you feel like I'm present? Is this season costing you more than I've realized? Do you still feel chosen? Y'all, those aren't questions that you ask once. They're covenantal questions. They're not even just questions for your spouse. Ask these questions to those that are around you, those you love. Because covenant requires conversations. So I want you to ask, what would they know about us? Maybe that's what this newborn season has reminded me of. What would they know about us? It's not that work doesn't matter, because it does. It does, y'all. Work matters. It's not that ministry doesn't matter. It does. It absolutely does. It's not that there aren't moments where we need to put our heads down and work harder than normal, or work harder than usual. There are certainly those times. But the point is that the people closest to us should never have to wonder indefinitely where they rank. They should know. And they shouldn't know because we've told them. They should know because our lives have told them. And that's what I'm working towards. That's what I'm working on. I want enough history with my family that when something extraordinary requires more of me, then they will know, yep, that's extraordinary. I want my normal presence to give credibility to my occasional absence. I want the people closest to me to know that if I say, hey, y'all, this is important, they will trust that it must truly be important because I've already proven that they are important. And again, I haven't mastered that. I'm still learning how to do it. And I imagine a lot of us are. We're in the middle of trying to build something meaningful without losing something sacred. We're trying to answer God's call while loving the people he's entrusted to us. We're trying to know when to push, and also we're trying to learn when to stop. When to say yes. When to say no. When the sacrifice is worth it. When the price is simply too high. I don't have all the answers. There isn't always a formula for that. But maybe there is a question. Before the next yes, before the next season of grinding, before, I don't know, the next opportunity, before we tell everybody at home, just give me a little more time. Maybe we ask, if I keep living at this pace, who will know me best when it's over? Will it be the audience? Will it be the customer? Will it be the congregation? Will it be the organization? Will it be my leadership? Will it be the people who follow us? Or will it still be the people who share our table? Because what's the point of the world knowing us if our families don't? What's the point of the world knowing us if those around us don't? And so that's the resolve I'm trying to live. This is not a victory lap. This is not something I've mastered, but something I intend to keep choosing. Make no mistake, I'm committed, right? I will work hard. I will answer the call. There will be seasons when my family and I decide together that the sacrifice is worth it. But they will participate in the sacrifice. They will not become the sacrifice. I will not put my family on the altar of success. And when I get it wrong, I'll listen. I'll adjust. I'll repent when I need to repent. I'll come home when I need to come home. Because the goal isn't to become a person who perfectly balances everything. The goal is to become a person whose priorities are unmistakable to the people who know him best. So maybe that's the question for all of us. If the people closest to you had to decide your priorities, using only the way you spend your time, your attention, and your presence, what would they say matters most to you? That's the question I want to keep asking myself. I hope you will ask yourself too. And here's my resolve. Whatever God allows me to build, I refuse to build it by tearing down what he entrusted to me first. If this episode blessed you, I'm going to ask that you share this with somebody. Like, tag somebody in the comments, subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook. Let's do better together. Appreciate y'all for listening to another episode. See you next time.